Fun times with the family here. Playing in the backyard. My 2-year-old and my parents here. Hi, I'm Peter Bell. Nice to meet you, Arlene Collins, I believe it is. And Neal Blackmore, always a pleasure. Neal's an unusual guy as far as I'm concerned. There's not many kind of proper people who have any, well, I want to say proper business guys. I don't know if Neal's a proper business guy, but I find there's not many people who have much good business experience in the junior mining space, and particularly in the prospector niche. There's a lot of people who are kind of like retail investors, and they I find they get pretty emotional and they're pretty hard to deal with. So we've done a bunch of stuff in privately in Newfoundland and various public company stuff as well. Run through the history on all that if you want. But suffice to say that none of it would have been possible without Neal, as far as I'm concerned. He was the sober second thought, or at least the primary contact who had a clue of all aspects of the business, which you really need when you're trying to structure deals. You got to have one person that can kind of represent things. That's one of the hardest parts I find with deal making too. And the more people you get involved and kind of more interests and directions that people want to take things, you want to talk about this, talk about that, right? It gets complicated. So simplicity is important for success with this stuff, I find. And lots of stuff to tell you guys about. Long story short, we have a shell. I was involved in a hostile takeover of it in August 2021. I had joined the board in January 2020, thinking that it was a real group of, real exploration guys who'd just been hit and crushed by the bear market. And turns out it was not that. It was more of a lifestyle play. So I didn't really like what was going on. And then it turned out there was another large shareholder who didn't like what was going on. We kind of came together and I provided the slate of new directors for the team. The other guy wanted the old guys, the other people out. They're out. And he figured he'd take his chances with me rather than trying to staff it up himself, because he really didn't want to have to deal with all the headaches that come along with a public company. And I didn't quite know what I'm getting myself into. I've been, professional investor here for 5 years in this business, but haven't ever been an executive beforehand. And this was my first board position too. So it was kind of important for me to really commit to doing a good job on it. And that wasn't happening with the old team. But there's the potential for that to happen now with me as CEO, and the other 2 directors I have are, one's a geologist and one's a lawyer. Lots more to say about them. They're good people. So far they're willing to play ball with me in the direction I want to take the company. But one of the big things they've said is that they want me to focus on fixing the company before I go off hunting a bunch of new properties. So that's kind of led me to this position now where I'm interested in signing LOI, letter of intents, rather than full option deals, because I need board approval to issue shares and make large property payments to get into option deals, property option purchases. But to sign an LOI and do some due diligence, I don't, right? So that's what I've done in Nevada. We had this project called Eastgate that we inherited. It was a bit of a mess, and I used a Nevada contact that I have there to do some field work, and that was what it was. Okay, press release some results, ongoing. Even just yesterday we had some news out on that, and then digging up old data. But then it was this question of how much money do we really want to spend on that property. So we talked to him about another property he has called Rye Patch Mines. It's an old silver mine from the 1860s. It has something called apex mining rights. So it's a very small land position of 5 acres of patented claims. But it's got, a 50,000 ton mine underground, we think, from 1860s that was maybe 40 ounce a ton silver. So, okay, can we look at that in the 2020s again as a potential place to get some high grade numbers and, maybe even a development scenario, right? Contract mining, toll milling, you're in Nevada. There's a lot of the pieces of the puzzle that you need to make stuff like that work. So I signed an LOI on that, and we've been doing due diligence with the project vendor there, and he's been QP. So a qualified person becomes a really important aspect of these deals so that we have public market quality news flow. And I really like working with property vendors who can be project managers, exploration managers, and somebody who can be a QP too. I don't want to send somebody from Ontario to do a desktop review of somebody's field work in Nevada. I want somebody local to be the qualified person who's signing off on the technical work that's done. With this stuff in Newfoundland, that's a possibility, because Neal's group has access to QP geologists who are friendly and close. And of course they are available to hire. Outside of that, it can be a little tight finding the right ones at the right time, but it's available. So you look at this rye patch deal, and one of the key terms that we had there is basically on signing of the definitive agreement with approval from the exchange, issuance of 5% of the company. And you talk about 5% of the company for a 5-acre land position, people are kind of like, what? Are you crazy, Peter? It's like, well, it's not just 5 acres, you know, there's a few other claims to the south. They're separate, 40 clicks away, a different story. But, you know, yes, it's a 5-acre land position, and it's a quality partner who's going to do quality work, and they're going to contract back for us part of the exploration work as to be paid in stock, which helps take our money a bit further, because the US dollar is a nasty headwind, and Nevada's expensive at the best of times. But that model of large stock payments early to project vendors who can be involved in field work, that is the approach that I like. That's one of the plays from the playbook here that I think is a reasonable way to approach these deals. So other public companies, you know, they may come in and start trying to figure out what your property's worth and then negotiate you down to some price that you're willing to accept, look at comps and all these things and say, oh, Newfoundland's cooled off now, it's not as hot as it was a year ago, blah, blah, blah. So, you know, the negotiating strategy that you're going to encounter with some of these other entities in the public markets is, ask Neal about that. I don't have much to say about that. But the strategy that I do is much more different. I'm really looking for high quality kind of value add partners. And then to be a high quality value add partner myself, right? And to offer deal terms that are generous to the property vendor, so that you're coming in with big incentives to align, you know, to make you hungry, to make the project a win, rather than just like, well, the company has it if they can make it work. No, that's not what I want. I'm standing here in Victoria, BC. I can't mount a field program in Newfoundland or Nevada without local connections, right? And so I want to build the property deals in ways that bring those local connections into the deal from the start, basically. I like to talk in simple terms about percentage points of the company, really, rather than share count, numbers of shares, because the shares can always be rolled back and things like that. So the number of shares can change, but the percentage points of the company is really kind of an anchor position. And I've, you can see that in my own actions. Since I took over the company, I had about 5%. I bought 5% of the company, 5 million shares in a financing that closed in April 2021. And then after the takeover, I put about 85 grand into the company on debt, and I converted that to another 5 million shares. So I've got over 10 million shares now at a cost base of $0.0125, $0.015, something like that. And that's relative to, you know, market price, 2.5, 3 cents, somewhere in there. 100 million shares out basically right now. So lots more stuff we can get into on the stock side and all that, and the accounting. All those things are very important, and I've published some interviews and things like that publicly that provide a lot more detail than most public companies would do in a situation like this. But again, radical transparency is the kind of buzzword that I like to use for that. It's a phrase from Ray Dalio, a very successful hedge fund manager, and you know, it's just another example of things trying to do differently to make it easier for people to see what I'm about, and also to hold myself accountable in the future to what I said I was going to do, right? So that we actually have some reference. And that's a big part of what I do online as well too, is really networking and documenting what I'm up to and what other people are doing, and then kind of scorecard to see, you know, management scorecard, performance review stuff. Surprisingly doesn't happen a lot in the junior mining business. It kind of does in some ways, but it's a little informal and it's not really very well structured. So, you know, it's the last 5 years I've been doing interviews basically as a full-time job in the junior mining business and investing. It's been pretty lean times for a lot of it, but then, you know, you get those great windows of time where you can do really well if you're geared up and aggressive, and you know what you're looking for, and you haven't screwed people around too much in the past, right? So I've kind of walked that line. Things have gone well, and now I have this public company, and it's a question of what do we do with it, right? And the thing I'm looking for right now is LOI, letter of intent, to sign, like we did for Rye Patch, that specifies some of the deal terms of what a property option deal would look like, but not signing the full option agreement yet. Sign the LOI, press release that, do some homework on the project, let us compile the data, let us send somebody out there, have a look, all these kinds of things, fund some work with the partner, the vendor, to do more due diligence, right? That's the playbook I've used at Rye Patch, and I am looking for other opportunities to do that again. What Neal has told me about West Highland is almost a level beyond what I had imagined as my kind of greatest dreams. I really have a lot of respect for the aggregates business, and the mining contractors niche space is very, very bullish to me. So to link up with a partner, a project vendor who has that stuff in-house, and then also to have Neal in the mix with his QP people close at hand, and some of his other exploration services people at hand, that whole thing puts a lot of the pieces of the puzzle that I need on the board from the beginning, right? And okay, we're building up the picture pretty quickly here. And then the ability to pay the exploration services people, you know, in stock. Typically that's a pretty risky move for contractors to get paid in stock. But in scenarios where they're already heavily invested in the deal, on the property side, right? Like, it becomes in for a penny, in for a pound kind of a thing. And not talking about paying all of the program in stock, but just like having a component that's partly stock. That helps stretch the company's money further. And then if we also do stuff with the flow-through funding and the government rebates, there's all kinds of other ways that you can kind of amplify the money that you raise and make it beneficial for the investors who are providing it on a risk capital basis, so that there's some liquidity in the stock when you turn around to try and sell it down the road. All those deal structure things are very, very important to me, and I'm looking for partners who get some of those issues and are kind of more sophisticated about it than, oh, I'm just gonna get a bunch of stock and then sell it. It's like, no, we're looking for people who are going to be involved in the deal more on an ongoing basis. Exploration services side, investor side, promotional side. You may not think Neal Blackmore's little Twitter account is worth very much or whatever, but that's how I've done most of my interacting with him, and that's even how I heard about this property, right? And very, very bullish for me. The pieces of the puzzle that I've heard about so far, the aggregates business and the mining contractor space, again, I have never found project vendors who have that business as part of what they are doing. All the project vendors that I know, they're either kind of sophisticated and small guys like Neal, or they're even more amateur and smaller than that. I understand that these players do exist, but they're kind of bigger than anything I've seen before and or dealt with, really. That's fine. There is, to that, I would say, think about the value of getting in public companies when they're smaller, right? So you might think, oh, it's a larger private company. We have already success. What do we need this little rinky-dink busted shell for? It's like, well, if you can get a gargantuan position in the public company and keep it and be very much involved in doing the work to generate the value in the market and the promotional side that gets the bids in to, create liquidity for yourself, you can make an inordinate amount of money that way versus doing a more fair deal with a larger junior, right? So there's some trade-offs and kind of strategic issues that you as the vendor group want to think about there. But my shopping list is, as I say, projects with vendors who understand the value of stock over cash and are willing and able to be involved in fieldwork side and already have put some work into the project too. That's another thing that's really important to me. I've just got through a few conversations. I've been talking to a few public companies the last few days about projects that they have that might be what I want for Kermode. The stumbling point with those has been the letter of intent. Basically, you know, the one public company says, oh, well, we usually get paid 50 grand to sign a letter of intent. Oh, really? Right. And show me the drill database on this property again, where you have one intercept in 25 holes. What? No, sorry, that's not happening. And then the other, another company, that was Riverside Resources, RRI, and their Long Rose property in Ontario. It's a greenstone belt with some high-grade gold, but, you know, I went to John Mark Stouty, the CEO there, and was like, hey, can we do something creative? And basically the answer was no. We can do the normal Riverside deal or nothing. Okay, thank you. Moving on. Another public company I talked to was Advanced Lithium, AAX. Alan Barry Labucan, CEO there. And he's open to a little more creative stuff, but he wants us to roll the stock back, do the property deal, get him involved on the board, and then finance the company. And it's like, yeah, but the rollback first, I don't want to do a rollback first. I want to get the company as far as we can before we roll back, before we finance, because I want to see what the future is. Like, what can we put together here, kind of on the small amount of money that I've put into the company so far, and a little bit more money, small amounts, you know, I've put, right, 85 grand in. That's pretty small money for a public company. But because it was at a penny and a half, 1.5 million valuation for the company, it was 5% of the company, right? So it lets me get up over 10, and earning into these deals when they're very small is very, very important. But then you have to be careful that you're not taking too little, because, well, you know, we've spent $500,000 on this property, say, and you want us to buy it for 10% of the company, but that's only 200 grand. Where's the difference, you know? Like, and so the numbers, you got to be careful, and you got to understand what these things look like. But the other public companies I've talked to, they basically aren't interested in the LOI stuff that I want to do right now. So that opens things up for me with you guys here, and run through the details here in a pretty quick manner. Hope you can kind of tag along and keep up with what I'm talking about. I drafted up kind of example terms for an LOI and for a full application to the exchange, to kind of, and I sent those to Neal Blackmore yesterday to kind of illustrate what I was thinking about there. And I don't know if this would pass my board of directors per se, but as an example, the schedule that I had was 0 cash, 0 work commitments, and then 10% of the company, 10 million shares on signing of the definitive agreement, and then another 10 million shares on the 2-year anniversary. So 2 years after that, because 1 year goes by pretty fast, and it's like, no, so just 2 payments of 10 million shares each, which takes you up to 20% of the company at this point. There will be dilution by the time the 2-year schedule rolls around. So it's almost like there'll probably be 100% dilution by then. So that 10 million shares in 2 years is meant to kind of keep you at 10% of the company. You would be under 10%. You wouldn't quite be a filing insider. You're going to be like 9.9 under those terms or something like that. So you're not a filing insider. But I wanted to share that. And then there was some other things that I added into, like a future sales interest and a 5% royalty. You know, the future sales interest is like if Kermode ever sells the deal, then you get 5% of that, you know. And then a payment as well that's like 5 million shares if we ever get into commercial production of copper, say, you know. Those were kind of some of the rough terms that I was thinking of sharing, that I sent to Neal, and was like, you know, have a look at this. This is a pretty unusual deal term, but if I can give you this to think about for what I'm talking about, right, as a way to kind of specify what I'm thinking about and how I see us making a win here, that's what I'm thinking about there. I'll run through those numbers, and I'll send you the documents as well, so you can kind of refer to that. I went through what the actual TSX requires us to apply the documents that they ask us to submit for a property deal, and I basically just filled those in and then drafted a letter of intent to go along with that kind of had the same terms in it. So I would say I would like to sign the LOI sooner than later if we could, like whatever terms we agree to. I would like, we can be somewhat more aggressive in the LOI, and we can change the terms when it comes to the final agreement, you know, in a friendly way. But my goal is to kind of get an LOI in place sooner than later, so, you know, I can take that to the market when it comes time to do the next rounds of financing and show people, okay, this is the property interest, this is the new group that we're trying to team up with here, this is a direction that we can take the company. That clarity for the investors is really important. And so to my mind, it would be something like sign the LOI here in January, and then have maybe 3 months period where we're kind of doing due diligence, check out all the data and all the work that you've done so far, ideally mobilize and do some more field work. I have some people, you know, I'm happy to use company money to pay for exploration work during the due diligence period, because that generates news flows for us. And if we're generating bullish news flow, then that's moving in the right direction. There's also some other, so we work with you to generate that news flow, and your whole group on the Bercy, the contractor side, and then Neal's side as well. Like that whole, you guys have a lot of the pieces of the puzzle, as I say, right? So work with all of you to do exploration and generate some news in the due diligence window. And then also send some of our people. There's somebody in Ontario I like who has some useful skills and knows some things about electrowinning copper kind of in the backyard, and the ability to, you know, take some high-grade samples, crush them down, put them in a salt bath, put in a electrode and plate copper, and then take that out and scrape that off the steel rod and do an assay of that refined copper and say, hey, this is, you know, 95% copper, 92, 98, whatever, pick a number. And then what other metals came along with it. That's kind of a way to shortcut the assay labs, because the wait times at the assay labs are potentially longer than the due diligence window. So what kind of due diligence can we possibly hope to accomplish if we don't even have assays? Stuff like this, you work with some of these pretty smart prospectors who know some tricks about, you know, hydrochloric acid on a rusty nail. You know, that's another example of the leaching work that you can do. That's the simpler version of what Mark Brazo does with the saltwater baths and the car battery. But I would like to send him out there to, you know, to check on some of that stuff, teach you guys how to do some of those tricks. He knows lots of things from a life as a miner, and I'm sure you guys have all kinds of great knowledge as well that's led you to make, you know, the discovery that you're working on there. It's a pretty impressive story from what I've heard and seen so far. And then there's this caveat too that, you know, maybe I'm talking about overpaying completely, right? If you look at what other deal terms, what other deals are going off for in Newfoundland or comparables right now, you may think, oh, what? No. You know, and the investors might think that too, that I'm being overly generous or something like that. So I try to combat that by making the project as good as possible, like really trying to do work on it to make it clear that, yeah, it may look like it's an expensive deal from the company, but what's the other option? We're going to go get a worse property? Is that for less money? Like, I'd rather pay up for the better property. But the caveat is, can we find a way to structure the deal so that we can afford it? And the thing that Kermode doesn't have access to right now is the cash, and our access to funding in the future is unknown. Don't really have a good sense of what that will be. It's kind of reflexive and related to the property interests and the work programs that we do. But sometimes you need a Kickstarter too to kind of get things going and show the market what you have before you can really raise the money to keep showing it what you have. Chicken and the egg problem between results and funding, right? Don't have any results, how do we get funding? Well, we don't have any funding, how do we get results? How do you break that loop? To my mind, you break that loop by finding bullish partners who are willing to take stock to do things that otherwise contractors wouldn't do, right? So again, talking about paying stock for parts of work programs and really just doing kind of small, simple things to get the ball rolling. And then once the thing has some momentum, then you have the full menu of options that public markets provide, right? And so, you know, this Kermode deal is a pretty small thing right now, but these things can expand quickly, and we do have the ability to tap into some deep pools of money out there. Those people aren't really plugged into the deal yet, but they do exist, and I know some of them, and my network, we have access to that. But they want to see a good property, and they want to see reasonable work programs, right? And they want to be positioned in the shell themselves heavily before, you know, they start to commit to fund this work program or that one. So there's a whole bunch of really complicated questions there that go back and forth around how you get the right people in your deal, and how you get the right properties, and how you do the right work to win the popularity game or the beauty contest of stock market speculation that we face. So that's kind of my thing. I've spent my life, I'm 35 now, since, you know, I've been market guy since I was 20 or younger, really fascinated by economics, and then just living out here on the West Coast really drew me into the natural resources side. Had some experience with farming and stuff earlier, farming land rights, and in Saskatchewan that had some very good excitement while I was doing academic stuff, PhD level economics. I didn't finish the PhD, but I spent 5 years doing that, and a master's in math at UBC before that, and I'm carrying on with my education now too, with some UBC executive education stuff in the mining space. So I kind of come at the whole business from an academic perspective to some degree, and really the theory of investments and the theory of gambling. And for exploration, you know, that's just what a lot of it is. It's a big gamble, right? So it kind of leads me into these situations where I'm thinking about things differently than other people, and willing to entertain deals that other people wouldn't. Like, for example, the rye patch deal. When our contact in Nevada brought that to me, he said, you know, look, Peter, it's small. You know, it's too small for a public company. The vendor said to me, I said, okay, show me it. I can't wait. I love it already. Too small for a public company. Won't work. Tell me again. Tell me again why it won't work. Right? And I'm not trying to be a contrarian for the sake of being a contrarian, but I know that guy, that vendor, is a high quality guy. And if he's held on to some ground since the 1980s, it's because it's meaningful ground. Whether or not the market can make sense of that ground right now is another question, but I can, and I can underwrite some risk, you know, to kind of dip our toe in the water on that one and start to communicate to the market what kind of work programs I want to do, what kind of deal terms we want to do, all this stuff. And so that's what we've done at the Rye Patch, and that LOI has been useful in that regard. It's given me something to talk about, as opposed to just these other old inherited properties that we have that I don't really have a lot of bullish sentiment towards. And so that's what I'm looking for here myself with regards to the West Highland, is something that I can put a flag into and say, hey, you know, we have an initial interest in this. We haven't signed the full deal terms yet. I got to convince the board of directors, but here are the elements that I'm looking at. You know, these are how I want to build my deals going forward. Smart partners, bullish properties, new areas, old things in new places, or new things in old places. That's the tagline. And a lot of the stuff, you know, I talked about with just the people and the value add people, right? And so I just say to some degree as well, it's carte blanche, right? Like if there's people from your group who want to be on the board of directors of the company, I want to make that happen. If there's ways that we can do flow through funding that kind of help create tax benefits for you and your family or your family business or whatever, that's something I want to do as well. I really think the public company kind of becomes of service to the property vendor in situations like this, because right now the public company doesn't really have anything in it, or anything worth talking about, really. And so we need to go and get properties, and then what do we want to get middling ones, or do we want to go get great ones? Simple. But the problem is simple ones are expensive. So the way to pay that expensive price is by giving the vendors a privileged position. And that's why I gave the anti-dilution rate in the rye patch. I don't think we should do the anti-dilution right here because the exchange has a hard time wrapping their head around what that is, and it slows things down and may delay approval timelines and make it a fundamental acquisition rather than an expedited one. Blah, blah, blah. A bunch of paperwork stuff that makes it that we can design the terms of the deal to effectively give that protection without calling it that. The big part of the anti-dilution right is that it protects the vendor if the company goes off and gets other properties, right? So when I approached the Carrington guy with the rye patch in Nevada, it was like, look, this is all there is. Like, but I want to go get more stuff. So what? And he's concerned that he's going to get diluted massively. And that's where the anti-dilution right comes in, and he keeps his 5% up until we raise $2 million. And then he can get diluted down. Oh, okay, that's what that means. All right, whatever, sure. That was something that gave him the level of confidence that he felt comfortable to sign the LOI. He's done anti-dilution rights deals before. They're relatively more common in the US than they are in Canada. There's a whole bunch of really subtle and important differences between the way they do their deals in Nevada and the way we do them in Newfoundland and Canada. Which one's better, which one's worth, I don't know. I'm trying to keep it simple here. I want to keep myself up over 10% of Kermode by buying stock in the financings, and I want to deal with other people who are large shareholders and really bullish on making the company and the projects in the company a win. I think copper is the most important metal right now for exploration, and I think Newfoundland is a reasonable jurisdiction. I do. Linked up with Neal, Blackmore and them on the York Harbor deal, and that has had some success already and is probably poised for greater success ahead with these, high-grade VMS deposits with old mines. That's just one of my favorite things, because you go in and you're doing new things in old places. You go in, you do borehole EM around the old mine workings. Now you have a 3D digital model complete with old mine workings and modern geophysics and all the old drilling, new drilling. That's great. You're off to the races. And then another thing, old things in new places, that's what I see with this West Highland. I think this West Highland is a new place. It's had some uranium in-file records, but no copper showing stuff. And great, okay, so that's a new place. And then old things, what does old things mean? Well, trenching and stripping cover and doing channel sample work, small blasting and backpack drilling. All these kinds of basic prospecting techniques that are... These are old things that guys have been doing a long time, right? So to bring that whole toolkit to bear on a new area, that's a bullish formula for me, as far as I'm concerned. So lots more to talk about with all that and everything, but I wanted to give you kind of a rundown of what I'm thinking about, where I am at. Sorry if it's a little long to listen to going past 30 minutes here, and let me know if it's confusing or fragmented or anything that you want to hear more about. Yeah, I'm keen to have a conversation as soon as possible here to talk about what it all might look like. I'm a big fan of Neal Blackmore, found him to be really useful for planning and executing work programs and also negotiating deals and stuff too. So if he can be part of this conversation going forward, I would appreciate that. Yeah, and I will send this over to you guys alongside the documents that I drafted up for Neal there, with kind of indication of a bullish offer or what I'm thinking about. And as I say, carte blanche, feel free to tear it up, show me something else completely different, or expand on the direction that I've already started to go in with those. Yeah, a real pleasure to even be able to talk to you guys about this, because there's a lot of aspects of this one that are my dream deal. Basically, they are things that I have been looking for and haven't been able to find anywhere else. So I am very, very excited to see where this goes. Thanks. Goodbye.